topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, South Florida. See, I have to think about what city I'm in today, but today's show, actually, this market, we're here in South Florida. We are in the, the Palm Beach area. This is where it all started 10 years ago. It started here in South Florida, and we've grown to 8 markets, and you find that there's some experts, it's like your kids, you do have a favorite. You love them all, but you got a favorite. So our guest for the next 50 minutes is definitely our favorite. Show has been going on with them 6 years, long time. And we get to have a guy who I have grown so fond of. He's so easy to do the show with. Let me welcome you to K. Bender Rimbaum attorney, Alan Schwartzide.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
I'm
starting to think that my friend and partner, Robert, is going to start getting jealous of how frequently I end up on your show.
Oh, that's good. Well, today's show, as always, is sponsored by board certified in family law, Tina Lord. She's out of Boca Raton, Florida, and you can reach her. She's open Monday through Friday, probably one of the top family law attorneys in Florida, not just here in South Florida. If you are going through marital problems or friends or family members, you want to call Tina Lord, Lewert. So, Alan, since we went to TV, every week I get about 10 to 15 people said, I just found your show, because we have so many more people that are putting in keywords now.
Mm-hmm.
And K. Bender Rimbaum comes up. Tell everybody about yourself and about K. Bender Rimbaum.
Sure. Well, thanks, Steve. Again, my name is Alan Schwartzide. I run the Orlando office of our firm. Formulated decades ago, literally. Robert K. has been in this industry for longer than he will probably admit. And most of the attorneys with our firm have been either with the firm on and off or with the firm for a very long time. There's a ton of longevity. So what you get is 21 attorneys who are very well versed in community association law. It's all we practice. We don't do any other areas of law other than several of us who are certified mediators. So there's some of that practice, but 99% of what the firm does is representing community associations. And, there are huge issues that come up, including construction law. We've got one attorney who's board certified in that area. Steve, you mentioned, 9 of our attorneys are board certified in community association law, and that's really what we do. So like I mentioned, I'm in Orlando. We've got our main office is in Pompano Beach in South Florida. Also in South Florida, we've got the office that Jeff Rembaum operates, which is in Palm Beach Gardens. And we've also got a Tampa office. We've also got Miami, which is by appointment only. So pretty much anywhere in the state that you've got an issue and you need representation as a community association, that's what we do, and we're here to try and help.
Alan, I think it's so important what you do, because when you're on the board, or if you're a president of the board, there is so much that you need to know, you need to do. And it's like running well, it's not like it is, it's running a large corporation.
Correct. And that's frankly part of why I know that the firm as a whole is big on education, but I personally, within our Orlando office, offer a board certification class every single month. And it's because of exactly what you just said, Steve. I think it's crucial that directors understand what their responsibilities are and don't just sign a piece of paper that says, I read the governing documents, I'll do my best. It's this minor class that takes 3 hours out of your day can provide so much information that I just think it's worthwhile to teach it once a month. And I know that our firm as a whole has several of these. Usually we'll have an HOA and a condo almost every month. I think it's really important that people understand exactly what you said, Steve. You are responsible for running a corporation, whether you like it or not, and whether you understand it or not.
You have to wear a lot of different hats, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, there are almost always at least 3 that you're wearing if you're on the board. You're a member of the community. You're wearing that hat. You're a director who is on the board and ostensibly making the decisions for the community. And then you're also usually going to be an officer of the community. That's either the president, the treasurer. If you've got a manager, some of those responsibilities may step away. But the reality is it's still technically going to be your responsibility to do whatever the bylaws say you're supposed to be doing and to follow Florida law and follow your governing documents. And a lot of people, again, don't understand that.
I'm curious to know, do you ever get questions from your clients asking you, I'm a board member, a first-time board member, or I'm the president for the first time, and all of a sudden people start flocking to you with questions?
Well, I get those almost every day when it comes to the general day-to-day, how do we operate? And there's almost always going to be a lengthy question and answer session if I'm doing a webinar or a seminar. There are commonly at least 20, 30 questions at the end. And the sheer number of people that attend these seminars, or at least the webinars, I used to be accustomed to maybe 30, 40 people showed up for a seminar. Now with the advent of Zoom and everything else we're able to use, we've got hundreds of people literally on every webinar that our firm does. And all of them have questions. So yeah, I mean, we are constantly being bombarded with questions. And frankly, that is, I'd say at least 75% of my tasks for the firm are just to answer those day-to-day questions. How do we do this without getting in trouble? Or can we do it at all? And the answer is usually, well, technically no, but here's how you might be able to do it without getting in trouble anyway.
Well, I noticed like today, somebody was really upset because they do not have enough handicap parking. And they want to know, how do they get more handicap parking? And I know they have to look at their docs, but how does a resident who probably needs handicap parking and there's just not enough?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, unless they actually ask for it, they're not going to get it. So the first step that needs to be taken is that resident needs to actually say, hey, I have a handicap that precludes me from parking in a regular spot or makes it significantly more difficult for me to get where I'm going. I need a handicap spot. If no one comes and asks for that spot, the association has no obligation to even make an effort to basically shift one of the regular spots to handicapped. And then once that request is submitted, then you start looking at, depending on whether you're in a condo or an HOA, the Fair Housing Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, and then also your governing documents and the rest of Florida law to see, okay, well, can we accommodate this request, and are we required to? And if so, how do we do it without upsetting the apple cart? Because keep in mind, in some HOAs and some condos, you've got those parking spots that are limited common elements that are, for all intents and purposes, they're actually owned by a different owner. So you basically have to have that owner agree to give up that spot, or, you might have a big problem. So it's not it may sound like a simple issue. Well, they're handicapped, give them a spot. But it goes way beyond that. But again, Steve, your actual question was, how do we start that process? They got to ask for it. If they don't, association has no basis to be aware that they need that spot.
If you have a question, we have now, if you're watching our show on TV, we now have a chat room now. And I want to go to the chat room. This is from Dixon. Wants to know, oh, good. Thank you there, Juan. Do you see deadlines being extended with proposed legislation for SERS and milestone?
Well, those are actually two different questions. Do I see it happening in the future? I really hope it does, but I don't know. There has been a statement by someone at the DBPR that is higher up, so to speak, that those extensions probably won't happen. When it comes to the current proposed legislation, I don't think there's any extension that's being proposed or provided. Now, we already saw with this year, there's a Senate bill that's on the table right now, so to speak. It was proposed, I think, in February. It was amended on March 17th. So there's nothing that says while the legislature is in session that won't be amended again to add these deadline extensions, which frankly we're trying to accomplish, because I think it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for every community in Florida to have these inspections performed that are now suddenly required within the time that they're providing, which is basically the next year and a half. Keep in mind what we're looking at is this needs to be done for all communities that it applies to by the end of next year. And I just don't see that happening based on the amount of individuals, these engineers and architects, that are actually qualified to do the work. Now, one of the things that's being proposed that might help is not an extension as to the question that was asked, but it is trying to extend out who can do these inspections, the SERS and MER inspections. And what it is proposing to add is basically having a team that is overseen by an engineer or an architect, so that there are additional people that might not otherwise be able to do these inspections that now can do it with the oversight. Whether it's going to happen or not, frankly, I have no idea whether the current legislation that's being proposed is going to pass. Can't really say right now.
Okay. I hope that answered Dixon's question. If you'd like to call in here, I know we're getting some feedback now. I hope that's not anything that I'm doing. But if you'd like to call in, a lot of people call in. The phone number here is 561-623-9429. 561-623-9429. You can give us a call here if you've got a question for Alan. Alan, I got to tell you, the new laws have come out. They don't go into effect yet, but people know what the new laws are. But half the questions I'm getting are still about these new laws. And someone asked me yesterday, and I didn't really know, do they pertain to townhouses also?
Not expressly, unless they're working under a condominium scheme. So you're really going to look at the declaration and see, are we operating under condo, which is Chapter 718 of the Florida statutes, in which case the answer to your question is yes, those laws will apply. Or are we operating under something else? It might be a co-op, in which case it might apply, probably doesn't. Or if it's just an HOA that happens to share common walls, which is usually the way a townhouse is set up, it will not apply. So it's not all buildings in Florida, it's all condominium buildings. And even within that designation of condominium buildings, it's with specific limitations on who it applies to and who it doesn't. So the answer really is probably going to depend on your governing documents and how they treat the community. Does it incorporate the Condominium Act, or is it just incorporating Chapter 617, which is the Not-for-Profit Act, and or the Homeowners Association Act, which is Chapter 720? And if it's silent as to all of that, chances are it's not a condo, and it's not going to be subject to these laws that we're talking about.
Well, I got to tell you something else that's really sad. And I get at least 4 or 5 emails a week on this. People are still very worried, especially older demographics, Alan.
Yeah.
They're worried they're seeing prices going up, and they're seeing the values of especially in condos, going down. And they're very worried about this. And do you have any word of advice to them?
I hate to be blunt, and I hate to increase any kind of panic, but frankly, I think they probably should be worried unless we're able to get a fix in. One of the other things that's been discussed but hasn't been proposed by the legislature yet is the potential to allow associations to actually, levy these assessments in the first place. And I get that that's what, especially like you said, the older demographic, a lot of whom are on a fixed income, and can't justify the expense of higher assessments. The association's perspective is we need to be able to levy these assessments if you want us to do the work that these engineers are telling us we now suddenly have to do. Or frankly, a lot of communities are having to levy assessments and increase their budgets or get loans just to have these inspections performed, because they cost thousands of dollars. They're not,
right.
We're not talking about, well, give me $200 and I'll send you a report. When it comes to, well, what can these individuals do? I hate to say it, but I don't have any advice for you, because the bottom line is, yes, this is a scary time for people who own condominium units. We've got a lot of expenses coming up that I think are going to really hurt Florida citizens, even though it's intended for life safety. And I get that that's the political basis for all of this and the logical basis. The problem is not all of what is in the statute, and frankly, most of it does not, plays into logic. There's a lot that I think we've discussed and that I've seen Mike Bender and Jeff Rembaum, and I know I've discussed on, I can't even count how many webinars between the three of us and other members of our firm pointing out what the problems are. I know Jeff Rembaum's also shared some information in the roundup, what the problems with the existing laws are. And, I don't know that we frankly even bothered mentioning what's wrong with this new bill, because it creates even more issues, even though it attempts to correct some of these. So without spending the entire hour talking about that issue, I just don't have any advice other than watch what your board is doing and make sure that they're doing it the right way.
Exactly. We just got a text in from George in Boca. Is it ever an excuse that the condo has no money for repairs, or does a condo always have money if they ask for it?
Well, the answer to the second question, does the condo always have money if they ask for it, is no. Otherwise, there would be no foreclosures going on.
Right.
You have to get the money in order to have the money. So that's what your assessments are intended to pay, whether that's regular or special assessments or individual assessments, whatever it may be. The purpose of that is to be able to maintain and operate your community. And if people are not paying their assessments, then that becomes difficult or impossible. I mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do is figure out how to be able to fund these additional expenses. Well, that applies across the board to all expenses. If the association under budgeted or came across expenses that were unanticipated, yeah, it's entirely feasible that they don't have the money to do the work. That doesn't mean they don't still have the obligation to do the maintenance and repairs and operation and replacement that they're required to do under your governing documents in Florida law, but it means that it might not be practically feasible to actually do the work that they're required to do. Now, the way that you fix that is, frankly, demand that they do it, see what their response is. And if they say, we just don't have the money, then, they might need to try and get a loan, try and pass a special assessment to fund these projects. And, if the governing documents require a vote of the members, which is really the issue that we're seeing with a lot of communities having to try and deal with these new expenses for reserves and reserve studies, they might have to go and try and get that member vote. And if they don't, they have to choose between being out of luck and not having the funds to do what they're required to do and being sued for that, or doing something that technically wasn't authorized by the members and being sued for that. The question is, which violation is worse? Is it doing what you were supposed to do in a bad way, or not having the ability to do what you were supposed to do, so you didn't do it.
Well, I hope and pray that we figure out a way to get around this, because it could get really messy, and we don't want anybody ending up in a bad position. We just got, this is from Winston in Delray Beach. Can you explain the process of how the board of directors file a complaint? Oh, we've never had this one before. Complaint against a property manager with a DBPR.
Well, I mean, frankly, that's a pretty straightforward answer. There is a form on the DBPR's website. I think you can actually submit it electronically directly from the website. You just got to look for CAM licensure and you submit it. You know, I mean, I don't think it's always the best idea. A lot of times the board is misunderstanding their contract and what the manager's obligated to do. I'd suggest that you have your attorney take a look at what's going on before you just unilaterally decide I'm going to threaten someone's livelihood. I feel the same way about bar complaints. If someone's going to file one, you should check with an attorney or a Florida bar attorney that does that area of law to find out, well, was this actually wrong pursuant to those restrictions, meaning the Florida bar rules, or in this case, the CAM licensure requirements, or was it a misunderstanding that, this person shouldn't really have to deal with? I'm not suggesting that there's never a reason to file that type of complaint. I've come across several CAMs in my experience over the years that, frankly, I thought it might be appropriate to do exactly what's being suggested. But you got to make sure that it's right to do it, not just that you're doing it because you'll excuse me, but because you're pissed off.
We have another text coming in on the chat line. Let me see. Juan, I love it when Juan puts these up because they're so much easier to read. See, when you hit my old age of 30, or maybe 40, maybe 50, the letters get really small for some reason. Thank you, Juan. Is it normal that Florida insurance companies are informing associations so last minute about crazy high rate hikes? I've seen greater than 300% mid-budget seasons. Is that true?
The answer is yes, it's true, and no, it's not common. It's becoming common over the last year or so from what I've seen. The bottom line is no, that's not common. And unfortunately, there are statutes that were just put in place and became effective very recently. I think it was actually last week or the week before that essentially, I hate to say this in a public forum, but pretty much allow the industry to do whatever it wants, the insurance industry. Now, that doesn't necessarily pertain to the rates themselves. It's just what happens when a claim is filed. But yeah, it's becoming common, but initially, at least for the last few years, in my experience, that was not a common occurrence. And it's just suddenly over the last, I'd say, year or maybe two, it's become common. And it's frankly frightening, but there's not a whole lot we can do other than look for another insurance company, which is increasingly difficult.
Yeah, it seems like it's getting more and more difficult because a lot of these insurance companies are going out of business.
Right. As each one goes out of business, the others are able to justify higher rates.
Exactly. Before the show started, we had 2 text messages, and I don't know if this is the same one of the people asked before, but I want everybody to hear your response.
Okay.
If you feel like your property does not have enough handicap spaces, what do you do to get that changed?
You reach out to the board or the manager and you try and see if they will assign a different space to you, or at least create handicap spaces. Now, the problem is you can't really assign a handicap space. It becomes a little bit more complex. So what the association generally will do is create handicap space, but whether or not you're going to get that space at any given time becomes kind of a secondary issue. But the bottom line is, to get that process started, you have to ask the association to create a handicap space for you.
Okay. Let's go to break.
Sure.
And when we come back, we're here talking to attorney Alan Swartzide. He's with the K. Bender Rimbaum law firm that handle community association law. One of the finest when it comes to condos and HOAs, one of the finest law firms in the state of Florida. Please give them a call. I'm telling you, I'm having people say, we're going to call them up for a second opinion, or we're not really happy with our representation and we've been looking for someone new. I'm telling you, K. Bender Rimbaum, they understand this and been doing it for a long time. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we have more with Alan.
K. Bender Rimbaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On kbrlegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several K. Bender Rimbaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. K. Bender Rimbaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact K. Bender Rimbaum today by calling 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
And yes, our expert guest is from the K. Bender Rimbaum law firm. His name is attorney Alan Swartzide. And I think this is about your fourth or fifth show you've done with us. And you just handle it like you've been doing it for the last 10 years. And I got to tell you, this will give you a warm and fuzzy feeling. I just got a text message from somebody who said, your firm handles all of our business. I hope they're talking about the condo association business. But they said, without a doubt, K. Bender Rimbaum is one of the finest law firms we have ever worked with. What we love about K. Bender Rimbaum is when you call up with a question, it's something that bugs you because you got to get an answer right away. And never have I waited longer than a day for them to get back with me, which is not what normally happens with other companies. Thank you for the show. I'm ready every Thursday and Monday, and we do appreciate your firm doing this to help us. Now, that's a nice letter.
Well, I certainly enjoy hearing that. And, I know personally I ensure that every client communication gets at least an acknowledgement within 24 hours. And I agree. That is different from what you're going to see with most firms in this practice area. Literally just last week, I had a client come join the firm because the attorney that they were trying to reach out to, this was the property manager, had spent the last 3 weeks pushing them off and not giving them even a phone call back regarding a time-sensitive issue. So I was, called to step in on that time-sensitive issue, handled it within 2 days. But it's amazing to me how few community association law firms, and let's be honest, law firms in general and lawyers in general, actually treat that communication as crucial when in reality, communication is what we get paid for.
Yes, that's true. And you know what else, Alan? Sometimes people don't realize the small things. I've probably been out to your Pompano office 10 or 11 times. And I go into other attorneys' offices, and most of the time, maybe there's one person sitting there. Maybe. And you have to sit outside and wait for someone to come to the front desk. I have never, ever seen less than 2 people at the front desk when you come into K. Bender Rimbaum at the Pompano location.
Yeah, and it's been that way. I think I had mentioned in the past, I first joined the firm in 2010, and it's been that way since I was first with them, and now since I've been back for the last 7 months. It's just, again, it's part of the firm's communication style. We want to make sure that no one is sitting there waiting around, and frankly, we don't want to waste anyone else's time, just like we wouldn't want anyone wasting our time.
Well, that to me means that customer service is so important at K. Bender Rimbaum.
Well, and frankly, that's also a part of why we do so much by way of education, why we're on your show, and why I have a webinar coming out immediately following the show tonight, and why we've got so many others coming up throughout the rest of April and frankly every month. That's one good thing about having so many attorneys that are not only doing the work but involved in the industry and knowledgeable about different areas of this industry, that we've always got something going on. I can't remember the last time there was even a week that we didn't have 1 or 2 webinars coming up, or at least 1 or 2 events like your show that at least one of our attorneys was on.
So you have some classes coming up.
We do.
Next month. Next month is, 2 days away?
Yes, it is.
Boy, the year has gone by fast. Let's share with everybody the different seminars you've got coming up.
Sure.
If you're watching TV and you miss something, we're scrolling it across the board.
So I actually, before we hit April, since it's only 2 days away, like I said, tonight, I'll be teaching a course regarding your governing documents and why you need to keep them updated. You can sign up on the firm's website for any of these at kbrlegal.com. The one we have coming up on April 12th, which is the next major one, what you need to know and how the proposed legislation may affect your association. In other words, what the heck is the legislature going to do to us now? April 13th, that next day, we have a board certification class for condos taught by Andy Black. And by the way, Mike Bender is going to be the one included on that panel for the 12th. So that's definitely one you don't want to miss. On the 13th, Andy Black is teaching that condo board certification class on Zoom. The SIRS and SB 4D, which is what we've talked about earlier, will be discussed by Lisa McGill on April 14th. That one's hosted by Real Manage, and it's also via Zoom. We've got another condo board cert via Zoom on April 17th by Peter Mullengarden. We've got Association Leadership, our legislative update, on April 19th. That is going to be on Zoom as well, taught by Mike Bender and Jeff Rembaum. We've got another jumping into the present, basically this similar presentation to the one that I'm teaching tonight, but this one will be taught by Emily Gannon. So let's be honest, it'll probably be better than mine tonight. That one is going to be taught via Zoom as well on the 20th. On the 24th, we've got another HOA board certification by Peter Mullengarden. And then we've also got all of the condo and HOA expos. We're teaching classes at each one of those as well in Broward, which is April 4th. Palm Beach is April 11th. April 26th, I'll be in Orlando. And I believe on April 27th, I'll be in Tampa as well. So we've got a lot coming up this month, and that doesn't mention the 2 or 3 that, let's be realistic, we'll probably add sometime between now and the time it comes up.
My favorite, Alan, is the one about Ask the Lawyer. And it's so amazing because a lot of residents will come in and they've got their question ready that they're going to ask, but they hear other people asking questions and they go, wait a minute, I got another question. And I saw a guy one night start off with one question and end up with 8 questions because there's things you don't think about. And then
absolutely.
And there was about 50, 60 people there. It is really wonderful. And, Alan's going to make Girl Scout cookies for you. So you'll be taken care of there.
Well, I'll be honest. When you come to the board certification class in my office, which I only allow, 6 to 8 people so that we have a small group, you get your chance to ask those questions. We do provide lunch. So it may not be Girl Scout cookies, but you'll get some food and some drink.
Well, it's free. That's all I know.
That's all that matters to most people.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's get back to our text. Does a condo HOA board, that sounds strange, does a condo HOA board have the right to pass an assessment to make repairs to a limited access area like a terrace that the rest of the owners have no access to?
So chances are, if we're talking about limited common areas, unless we're talking about, or limited common elements, unless, like I said, we're talking about balconies and things of that nature in a townhome community, I think this probably pertains to a condo. But the bottom line is the answer, regardless of whether you're talking a condo or an HOA, I'm not aware of anything called a condo HOA.
Yeah.
They might have meant the condominium association, which people refer to. The bottom line is look at your governing documents, and that's going to answer the question. It's not an automatic right or an automatic no. It's check to see what your governing documents authorize with respect to assessments. That's the entire answer I can give without looking at your particular set of documents.
This is from Janet and Davey. If windows belong to the unit owner, how could you have reserves for windows?
I think this probably refers to the same thing we were talking about earlier, the new laws with respect to former Senate Bill 4D, which was adopted, and maybe the current Senate Bill 154. Well, we don't know the answer to that. And frankly, it's a question that I've been asking in every webinar and presentation where I'm discussing these issues. Does that suddenly make it an association responsibility if they are under the new version of the statutes, if the association is suddenly responsible for those reserves? Now, the way that I would look at it practically, which, by the way, is not my legal advice necessarily, but practically speaking, I would hope that the people that are doing these reserve studies are also taking the time to figure out of these reserves, which of these things are things that the association's actually responsible for maintaining. In other words, in your report that comes after this, the SIRS and the MER, is it going to say, well, the association doesn't have an obligation to maintain the windows, and therefore we didn't analyze what needs to be done? I think that's contrary to the intent of the statute, which is to protect life safety. And if you're sitting there and saying, well, we don't really care what's going on with the windows, even though they're not hurricane proof and there's no shutters, even though there should be, I think that kind of violates the intent of the statute. So chances are I don't have an answer for you because this makes no sense.
This next question, Alan, probably pretty cool and current question.
Okay.
They want to know, how do we as a board make sure we are covered if our bank goes under? Now, 5 months ago, you'd go, what are you talking about? We're not saying that anymore.
No, and it's funny because within the last 2 weeks, I actually sat down with someone whose primary function is association banking. And what she is suggesting, and I think it actually makes a lot of sense for the association's protection, is to make sure that you're depositing your funds in a bank either that provides, that FDIC insurance for up to the max amount that you're going to have in the account, or the alternative, which a lot of banks are now providing and frankly promoting a lot more since what's gone on over the last few months, is to actually have all funds in excess of that cap. I think it's $250,000 that's insured by FDIC. Those funds, let's say you have 350 of that rolls over into a separate account that's still maintained by the association without the association having to do anything to create the account. In other words, they're actually making sure that all association funds are guaranteed based on the way that the bank operates and maintains and moves those funds around into different accounts. And it's, I can understand that to some people, and this is something I raised to this person, that may be concerning that these funds are constantly being shifted around, but it's all being shifted by the same bank and you still take it out just like you had one account. So that's frankly, I think, your best bet when it comes to protecting yourself from the bank. It's not keep it under the mattress all of a sudden. It's make sure that your bank is doing that, or put it in a CD or something like that if you're allowed to. But I think the best way to protect the association without having to go back to the members or having to go into drastic measures and have your attorney involved is just to have a bank that allows for that shifting of funds every night.
Okay. We're getting a lot of text coming in. Okay. Let's go. Juan, let's put the next one up. Well, I love all the new fixtures to the shows, especially this one right here, where we actually take your questions and people can read online during the show and actually pump them up so the host can read them. This is from Philip in Pompano Beach. Do I have any rights to access to the surveillance system for security reasons due to the fact that I live on the first floor with no security? That's a first. I've never heard that one.
So the short answer is no.
Okay.
But
the long answer is no.
The slightly longer answer is still probably no, but that is what you would be doing, is requesting access to the association's records, which include that surveillance video. Now, whether providing those records and that access might be an invasion of others' privacy, I think what you'd probably end up needing to do is it would need to be in conjunction, I hate to be blunt, but with some sort of lawsuit. In other words, you're performing discovery within a lawsuit, and the association only produces the portions of the video that are relevant to whatever is going on in the case. I'm not aware of an obligation of the association to just hand over video. Now, that said, it is technically an association record. So really what we're talking about is whether there is a statutory privacy basis to exclude that from what the association's producing. Honestly, in my opinion, it's probably going to depend what's on the video. If others going around doing their business is on that video, the association's attorney will probably have to evaluate their privacy rights versus your right to feel safe in your home.
Well, this next question, Alan, is to me kind of strange, but you will understand it. This is from John in Lantana. He said, what if your HOA board sends a violation letter that you give up your rights to enjoyment at the pool, etc., but you're invited by another owner to come over and enjoy the pool with them?
This is not an uncommon situation. And frankly, when I start talking about suspension of use rights, which is really what this gentleman's talking about, it's the exact circumstance that I bring up when I'm talking about these suspensions. So the answer to the question is no, you're not allowed to use the pool because your rights have been suspended, presuming that suspension was done correctly by the association. The procedure that preceded that notice that you're talking about, the violation notice, was actually statutorily proper and proper under your governing documents if there's a procedure there. So the short answer is no, you're not suddenly allowed to use the pool because someone else invited you. And that is what we see with gyms, with pools, with other amenities within a community, is that unless you've got a way of keeping people out, the practical aspect of these suspensions is someone else might let these people in. And what I've suggested in the past is that the association make allowing someone else, if this becomes a huge issue, the association make the person that lets them in also in violation of the governing documents. You adopt a rule that disallows it. The problem is the other person might not have knowledge that this person was suspended. So, you really have a difficult time enforcing that, which is why I haven't really recommended it. I've just suggested it to communities who are saying we have to do something about this. But practically speaking, there's really not much that's going to be done. But the short answer is no, you can't suddenly go because someone else invited you.
Okay, I'm going to make this the last question of the night. Great question. They want to know if their management company told us that we have to take a vote for board members, but we have to have a minimum of 3 people or a maximum of 5. Can they do that?
Yes. I mean,
they can tell you how to vote
on the bylaws. There is a membership vote for who is on the board. That is called an election. It happens every year, or, depending on what terms are in the bylaws, term meaning not just the wording, but how long you actually sit as a director or an officer. But those elections generally happen every year. And if your bylaws say that you need to have between 3 and 5 directors at any given time, then that's how many you need to have. And if only 3 people are willing to put their names in the hat and your bylaws say that, you don't need to worry about the other 2 unless the board wants to appoint other people. But if 5 people or 10 people put their name in the ring, so to speak, or their hats in the ring, I'm mixing my metaphors here. The answer is, yeah, you would have to have the 5. And if 10 people go in, 5 of those 10 are going to end up on the board. So the short answer is yes, but it's, to be clear, it's not the manager that gets to say that, it's the bylaws that get to say it.
Well, I want to thank everybody on tonight we really got some great questions tonight. You're a wonderful guest, and you represent the firm so well. And I hope that maybe you can sit in for the boss, so to say, because the way you explain everything is just, you make it so easy for people to understand. We're so lucky to have you, Alan. And, we can't wait for you to come back.
Likewise, Steve. It's always great to be here. I've enjoyed every one of the shows we've done together. I look forward to the next one, which I'm sure will be sometime in the near future. You mentioned, by the way, the Ask the Attorneys seminar. I just got a text from Jeff Solomon, who was kind enough to be listening. We are going to be having one on June 8th. So we have one coming up. It just isn't included in the April announcements. But again, Steve, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Alan, so much. We will be back with you again next week with more Ask the Experts. And remember, on Mondays at 6:00, we have our Eat and Critique show on, where you can learn all about South Florida restaurants, the good ones, the bad ones, and the ugly ones. That's every Monday night from 6 to 7. And it is a gas. You don't want to miss this show. We'll see y'all next week. Everybody stay blessed.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.